Welcome everyone. I really appreciate taking the time and the energy to watch this webinar. Those that are here live at the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute, I want to thank the Institute for doing this. All the IT guys and the video production and the chefs, professors, and the students for making this happen. On behalf of the New York Beef Council, we very much appreciate it. I'd like to move forward. Along with me today is Kari Underly. She's a master butcher, also the author of The Art of Beef Cutting. It is a James Beard nominated book. You can get it at the bookstore. And she is here and she will be doing a cutting demonstration right after this of the subprime, the 112A. So without further ado, if you want to cue up the slide presentation. I'm going to take a little closer look at beef production in general. I'm going to take you through that pre-harvest aspect. A lot of you already know what to do with that cut or what to do with the meat after harvest. So I'm not going to go into details about dry aging, wet aging, inspection, because you do that within your classes. And so I want to talk a little bit where the most confusion is about our industry. My name is Jean O'Toole. I'm the Director of Public Relations and Promotions for the New York Beef Council. I've been with the Beef Council for a little over 8 years. Prior to that, I spent 2 decades in food service. To me, beef came in a box from Sysco or another purveyor. And when I went into the grocery store, it came from the grocery store. I did not grow up in agriculture. I did not grow up in the beef industry. I have a degree in human resource management and got into food service through going to school and working my way through it. So I had no idea until I started working for the beef industry. And let me tell you, it's astounding, it's phenomenal, and the great passion that these farmers and ranchers, not only in New York State but across the United States, is something to behold. Those of you who have ever gone on a beef tour, and I invite you, if you ever have the opportunity, to do that so that you can see that hands-on. So I'd like to move forward. Oh, I don't like this. There we go. There we go. One thing I want to explain to you is where our funds come from. This big beef check in the lower right hand of the screen, that's part of our beef checkoff. The beef checkoff is generated through the U.S. Farm Bill over 26 years ago. And basically what it says is that for every time a bovine, a 4-legged creature, this is moo, exchanges hands, 50 cents of that dollar goes to our cattlemen's beef, or a dollar goes to the state it's sold in. 50 cents of that dollar goes to our cattlemen's beef board in Denver, Colorado. With that 50 cents, they put it towards education, promotion, research, nutrition, advertising, everything that encompasses the beef industry. The other 50 cents stays in the state that it's sold in. And with that 50 cents, we put it towards promotion and education. That's what we do. We educate, we promote, we don't sell. We keep a level playing field for all beef. So all the beef that we're going to discuss today and the types of brands and what have you, that's just going to be a level. We don't promote one brand over another or one kind over another. Hold on one second. Just a friendly reminder to please make sure that your phone is on mute. Somebody's having a good time. Okay, so there are 45 state beef councils in the United States. The 5 states that do not have state beef councils are Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Alaska, and New Hampshire. 4 of those 5 states are in the Northeast. We are consumption states. 25% or more of the population is in the Northeast. And New York, being one of those states, is a massive consumption state. We are not a beef state, and I'll get into that in a little bit more. From our family to yours, that family farm. So many times that you hear of factory farming. Truth be told, 97% of the farms in the United States are family owned. 99% in New York State are family owned. That's a heck of a lot different than what you hear. Those farms that are incorporated, LLCs, because there's multi-generations that are involved in that farming, so they are better off incorporating to keep that family farm safe and active. Now, I love this slide. It's one of my favorite ones, and the fact that 80% have been in the same family for over 25 years. It's a business that's been in the family for over 25 years. Thinking of all the mom and pop stores and the businesses in your hometown and how many didn't last 25 years. and how many that have. And the best number is 10% in the same family for over 100 years. What's been in your family for over 100 years? Other than grandma's engagement ring or a vase or a hutch or silverware. We're talking natural resources, we're talking land, we're talking cattle. You know, I always tell the students, it's not, oh, McDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O anymore. It's, oh, McDonald had a son and sent him to Cornell to get an environmental science degree or an animal science degree to take that farm to the next level. And that's what's important to remember. There's a lot of science involved in farming. Okay, the multitude of small businesses make the big business of U.S. beef production, as you see here. We're the largest segment in American agriculture. In fact, USDA says that more farms are classified as beef cattle operations, 35%, than any other type. And then in 2010, U.S. cash receipts from livestock totaled $130 billion. 45% of that total for all farm cash receipts in 2010 came from agriculture. Agriculture is the #1 export for the United States. Now, a real good thing that you see here is U.S. produces 20% of the world's beef with just 7% of the world's cattle. That's a significant number. And it just shows the efficiency that we have as U.S. farmers in the cattle industry. Now, comparatively, New York, as I mentioned, we are not a beef state. We're what we call a beef deficit state because we have such high consumption and high population numbers. We have over 13,000 farms with cattle in New York State. And as I mentioned, 99% of them are family owned. Now, of those, the cows and heifers kept for beef, there's only 131,000. Gives us that number 39th ranking in all beef cattle states. We're number 39. Our big one, what's the biggest one? Texas, right. Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Oklahoma, that whole belt right there in the middle in the Midwest. Huge beef production states. However, we're number 3 in dairy. Actually, we just got bumped to number 4 because Idaho beat us out. But we are a big dairy state, so the majority of our cattle numbers are from the dairy industry. Now, in conjunction with those big beef states, for instance, South Dakota. South Dakota oftentimes gives us their beef dollars to do programs just like this as a way of funding because South Dakota only has 800,000 people in their entire state. So as far as person to cow ratio, there are 7 cows per person in the state of South Dakota, where there's 13 people per cow here in New York State. To give you a relative idea of some of the ranches, they're not farms, the ranches out in North Dakota, is that they'll have 5,000 acres and maybe 2,000 head. Well, 5,000 or 50,000 acres is equivalent to 3 times that the size of Manhattan, New York, yet the population in Manhattan is 3 times that in the entire state of South Dakota. So put that in perspective. All right. New York is great land for forage pasture. We have a lot of hills that aren't necessarily good for cropland or large dairy operations. So cattle farming is pretty good. And a lot of our farmers are part-timers. They part-time farm and they full-time work outside the farm. Now the big question that we have coming, that many people ask, is how is my food raised? Where does my food come from? That's the burning question in society today. They want to know where it is, where it's sourced, how it gets there, where it goes. They want that transparency. And that industry shows us that. All right, the beef life cycle. And we start up in the upper left-hand corner. There's your cow-calf your stocker phase. And I'm going to go through each of those segments all the way through as to the 4 main segments. You've got your seed stock, you have your cow-calf, stocker, and then your feedlot. But to get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the gestation aspects. A lot of people right now are complaining about the price of beef. Beef is really high. What's going on? We kind of warned everybody a couple years ago with the big drought in Texas. 2 years ago, Texas had a massive drought. We said by 2014 you'd feel that effects, and this is the reason why. When it comes down to your proteins, chicken from egg until production is 63 days. You can turn over that chicken pretty fast. pork, they have a 4-month gestation, 6 months raising and feeding. So within 10 months, you can have it from that farm to that fork. However, the beef industry is a little bit different. The gestation of a cow is 9 months, just like humans. All right. So 9 months gestation, growing that steer can take anywhere from 14 to 18 months, and it'll go to harvest anywhere from 18 to 24 months, depending on the breed, depending on how it's fed out. So that industry, the beef industry, doesn't turn over on a dime like you can with the chicken. So to recover from that drought in Texas over 2 years ago is taking to this point. However, you also have to keep in mind that when after the drought in Texas, and we're relieved a little bit, there's a huge drought in the Corn Belt area of Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa. So corn and feed prices went through the roof. Thus, why replenish your cattle or your herd? Because you're just going to have to feed them out, and that's going to be really expensive. So right now, cattle numbers in the United States are a 60-year all-time low. Never seen numbers like this, and it was generating what they would call the perfect storm, and we're starting to see the effects. Prices are high now. They're going to get higher. But one interesting thing that's going on right now is demand is still high. People are still eating beef. They still want beef. And they're still buying beef. So far, it's pretty good. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about each of the segments. First of all, the first one is the Seedstock segment. That's your purebred segment. That's your certified Angus, your certified Hereford segment. They do a lot of genetic testing. They do DNA testing, some embryo transfers using selected genetics that will improve the quality and the efficiency of production. And that's why they do it. They'll do their DNA and genetic testing for leanness of the animal, tenderness, ribeye size, how the animal performs. Can the animal carry, calves without a problem? Can it birth okay? So they will go ahead and they will figure out through EPDs, as they're called, to find that genetic link to make sure that they are producing a consistent animal. So that is the Seedstock segment. We do have a couple seed stockers here in New York State, one on the eastern part in Ghent. Trowbridge Farms, he's a certified Angus beef. He sells his bulls all over the United States and is very good at what he does. The next segment is a cow-calf segment, very popular in the state of New York based on the fact that we have the land to be able to do that. Not a lot for crops. We have a lot of hills, a lot of rocky areas. It's perfect for grazing. This is the producers here take and combine the breeds and genetic lines developed by the Seedstock. So they'll take that certified Angus and they'll take that Hereford and they'll mix them. They'll get what's called a black baldy. It'll be all black with a white face, white belly. And they'll do that because they're trying to find that beef premium quality genetics. Now when a calf is born, it weighs anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds. Beef calves are weaned at 6 to 10 months of age, and they're right around 450 to 700 pounds. Once they're weaned off their mothers, they're oftentimes sold to the third segment, which is our stocker segment. And the stocker segment is the one that'll take it and feed it on grass. So lo and behold, grass-fed beef, when you see it on a menu, or you yourselves will someday be tempted to put it on your menu, every time I see it, I laugh. Because in my mind, I think, duh, all beef eat grass. A lot of people don't get that. You're standing there, sitting there laughing. All beef eats grass. Till maybe the last 150 days, which I'll get to in just a second. So the very next thing I want to take a look is when I mentioned cow-calf segment and looking at the state map here. In this teal color right over here in the northeast, that's all your forest land. A lot of forestry in that area. All right, not great for crops, too many trees in the way. Your biggest section for cropland is in that green area. So you can see that Midwest belt, that's where your corn is grew and your soybeans and what have you. You get into the yellow, you're getting into your grazing lands. Really hilly, grassy areas, not good for crops. Perfect for feeding out animals in a stocker area and letting them eat grass. Unfortunately, when there's a nice little drought, it makes it a little tough. So again, the herds are depleted because they need to be able to replenish the grass accordingly. All right, so utilizing land suitable for grain and production. It's an outlet for byproduct feeds, a lot of what we do and where, and recycling nutrients. We keep them on those grass. They eat the grass, they go to the bathroom, then they take those nutrients from the grass, and it just recycles itself over and over again. And it's also suitable for part-time farming, especially here in the state of New York. Okay, the backgrounder stocker phase. Again, the animal's going to go there between 400 and 800 pounds, and they're going to eat grass. Roll around in the fields, have a good old time. They promote growth with low-cost feed. Add maybe a little corn and wheat stubble, grass, byproducts, etc. But they'll be out on pasture land until that last 150 days when they go into the feed yards. Now, the feed yards, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that's where they're all crowded and they bunch them together. Actually, they're about 200 square feet per animal is figured in a feed yard. You could have a feed yard as one of the lot aspects of it, the size of this room, and all of the animals will go ahead and mingle in the corner because they're herders. So of course, when they see pictures, they're all bunched together because they're natural herders. They will go and be together. They like that community that they are. All right. Cattle are checked daily, three times a day, by the pen rider, aka the cowboy. That's where the cowboy came in. Up on the horse, constantly checking the animals. They are fed. They have constant access to water, room to move, and are free to graze and at feed bunks. This picture right here in the lower left hand, that is a feed yard in Nebraska that I had the privilege of seeing. And there was no overcrowding. There really wasn't a smell. It was quite amazing in how they use veterinarians and nutritionists to configure the feed based on where the animal is in that 150-day cycle to make sure that they had the optimal nutrients and nutrition. And feedlots are in all sizes. Some of them are maybe 1,000 head, 2,000 head. Some could be 20,000 head and run extremely efficiently. We have some really small feed yards here in New York State. A couple may be dabbling in it, but it's not something that is prevalent in New York State at all. So as we move forward, we want to talk about animal care. A lot of people are very much concerned about animal care, and well, they should be. Good care is just the right thing to do. This is their livelihood. This is what people do. They raise beef, they sell beef, and they feed you. And there's a lot of pride and a lot of concern when they're working with that. Nutritionists, again, veterinarians and animal handling experts are used to ensure the best animal care. As you see here, Temple Grandin, well-renowned individual, animal scientist, expert, PhD at Colorado State University. A movie was done by her. She's also autistic. Has revolutionized the industry in harvesting practice and in humane handling practices. Because of what she's done, the industry is where it is today in humane handling of animals. There we go. Cattlemen's responsibility in animal well-being. Beef Quality Assurance Program. Every state practices a BQA. It's part of our beef checkoff and ensuring that the producers are doing their best to ensure quality handling of their animals. Injection sites in a certain part of the animal, making sure that it's in the neck so it doesn't harm any of the quality of meat in the animal. Guidelines for the care and handling is taken care of, and it's developed by health experts and cattle produce leaders to ensure that there's a consistency and a standardization in how to handle the animals. Now, there is a difference. Let me go back real quick. There is a difference, and often this gets really confused, and I want to read this. A difference between animal welfare and animal rights. Now, animal welfare may be defined as the use of proper animal husbandry practices by farmers and ranchers that will ensure the continuous well-being of animals under their care. Animal welfare is a human responsibility that encompasses all aspects of animal well-being, from proper housing and nutrition to preventative care, treatment of disease, and when necessary, humane euthanasia. However, animal rights is a philosophy based on the premises that humans have no right to use or exploit animals for their own purposes. All right? There's a big difference. Humane treatment versus animals having rights that nobody else has is a different end of the spectrum and oftentimes gets confused. So always look at both sides of the coin, as I often tell the students. If you hear one thing and it's like, look for the other side, because in likelihood you are going to find it sometimes. And if not, then go to the experts and ask them. All right. Animal care after the animals leave the farm. Federal government inspectors actively inspect livestock handling. USDA assigns many veterinarians to all their handling facilities and any of the harvesting plants. Harvest cannot happen unless a USDA inspector is on premise. They can't run at all. It's against USDA. So far, we've covered the 4 segments. What I next would like to go into is the beef choices. Now, back in the 1990s, the industry went from a producer-generated to a consumer-generated focus. And when they did that, beef demand went up 25%. Go figure, you start listening to your customers and what they want, you're going to start selling beef. Well, that created a hodgepodge of different choices out there. And it gets really confusing, especially today. It's more and more confusing because there's more and more choices. You have your traditional, your natural, your organic, grass-fed, locally grown, and then you have your branded beefs. All right? The number one thing we have to remember is that beef is wholesome and nutrient-rich, no matter what or how it is produced. All right? Now, I already mentioned that all cows eat grass, and they eat grass for the majority of their life. It's just how they're finished that may vary. Some are grain finished, some are grass finished, and I'll go over those differences. Now, grain finished is that traditional beef. Most of U.S. beef today is grain finished. Calves on the pasture range feedlot from 7 to 18 months. Grain finished, they're 120 to 180 days fed on grain. Taste panel research shows that consumers prefer the flavor of grain finished beef over any other. And may be given FDA-approved antibiotics and growth promotants. So this is the majority of what we all grew up on. What I grew up on was that grain-finished beef. Grass-finished. This is a niche of the industry that more people are aspiring towards. Pasture-fed throughout the life of the animal. So after it's weaned from their mother, it is on pasture from that 6 to 10 months until they go to harvest. Now, grain finish will go to harvest at 18 to 24 months, where they'll reach anywhere from 12 to 1,400 pounds, or 12 to 1,300 pounds, I'm sorry. Grass finish may take a little bit longer, it could be 24 to 30 months to hit that 1,200 to 1,300 pounds, because they're eating grass. There's not a high protein aspect to that grass like there is with the grains. They can use antibiotics and growth promotants, but generally do not. And there's usually a little leaner and a little less tender. That grain creates that tenderness and that marbling in that meat, in that muscle. That's where the marbling comes from, is in that last 120 to 150 days is from that grain. You won't see that in your grass. See, I have to keep looking up at there so you don't put the camera on me. The grass-finished beef. And like I said, it'll be a little darker, the meat. Less marbling, and the fat will be a different color. It'll be a little bit yellower because of the chlorophyll from the grass. And again, safe, wholesome, and nutritious. A lot of people feel that grass-finished beef is more nutritious than grain-finished because of the omega-3s. This little slide shows you that if you have salmon, they have 1.83 grams of omegas. Salmon has 35 times more omega-3s than grass-finished beef. Now, looking at the grass-finished versus the grain-finished, you can see that it's like 0.02 difference. So if you're looking for the omegas, either take a supplement, have your beef, or have the salmon, because you're not going to gain it from there. As far as the nutritional differences between grass-finished and grain-finished, you can see that it's just pretty much moot. It's just a different taste. All right, your grain finish is going to taste a little beefier than your grass finish, and it's automatically a matter of preference. So that's why I always warn those that want to create their own restaurants or their menus or whatever, when you put down grass-fed beef, you really have to be careful. One, all beef is grass-fed, but two, it's a different flavor profile. And if you have a customer that's used to grain finish and comes in and puts it, puts his teeth into a nice juicy hamburger and there's just a slight difference of taste. Oftentimes people say that grass finish can be a little bit more sour, a little gamey. They're not going to have a good eating experience. So you need to make sure that they are fully aware of how it is finished. Don't be afraid to say grass finished beef. Don't be afraid to put grain finished beef. Or don't even put the grain finished if it is. All right? But it's specifically, it's just my own little soapbox about grass finish. Naturally raised beef is a great marketing claim, and it has been growing. All natural has been growing left and right. The thing is that beef is natural. Your cut beef, your roasts, your steaks is already natural because it is not minimally processed. Anything that is not minimally processed is all natural. It's USDA defines as a voluntary claim as of 2009. This is what would be considered your never ever program. Your all natural, never ever program in the sense of no growth promotants, no antibiotics, no animal byproducts, and that's been true to form since 1997, and can be grain or grass finished. All right? And then it's natural because it is minimally processed. So that is, let me go back real quick, that is that definition of what all natural is. Now organic beef. You see that USDA green label organic? Make sure you see that. How many of you like to go to farmer's market? The farmer's market says organic beef. There it is. Do they have that green sticker? If they do not have that green sticker, they're selling the fact that they're at a farmer's market, they grew their beef, and they're selling it to you directly. All right? If they're selling it to you directly, yes, it has to go through USDA processing. It's mandatory. But they have to have that sticker there, all right, to be considered USDA organic. And it's defined and regulated by the USDA. Organic program standards, 100% organic feed. So any of the feed that they give them must be organic. If they're growing their own feed, their fields have to be free of pesticides for over 3 years. They can give some vitamin and mineral supplements. They cannot be given growth promotants, and they cannot be given antibiotics. However, if the animal gets sick, they must treat the animal and then just take it out of that program and it'll go into a traditional program. Access to organic pasture and natural products are given to them, no synthetics. So that is the definition of organic. Now, is organic any healthier than grass-fed, grain-fed, or anything? No, it's not. Because all beef is safe, wholesome, nutritious. All beef has 10 essential vitamins and minerals, with zinc, iron, and protein being the top 3. All right? So just when you think you're less confused, then you get more confused with the types of brands that are out there. You've got Food You Feel Good About, that's Wegmans. Laura's Lean Beef, she's here, there, and everywhere. Certified Hereford, Certified Angus, that #1 brand that is out there. CAB is actually a non-for-profit association of American Angus Association. 10 attributes that animal has to hit to be considered certified Angus beef. Go ahead and look them up and you find out what the 10 attributes are. It's pretty interesting. They have done a phenomenal job of marketing and staying within their standards and parameters. Branded beef has been a commodity. Branding delivers a promise of quality, consistency, information, and safety. All right, and there are over 80 certified brands by the USDA. That's huge. No wonder we're confused. No wonder our consumers don't know what to get, what to do with it. Oops. And then you get your local raised. SK Hereford, they're out in Medina. Birdsall beef is in the Cortland area. Equity Angus is Port Byron. Adirondack beef is in Lowville. Sunnybrook Farms, he's a grass-fed beef. He's not far from Utica. So then you get those brands as well, and you're locally raised. But again, all beef is grass-fed. All beef is natural. All beef is nutritious. And all beef is safe. And whatever your choice, you're covering it. And as far as we're concerned, as long as it goes on the center of the plate, the beef industry is really happy. Now, healthy animals equal wholesome food. Veterinarians work with farmers and ranchers on a regular basis to implement herd health programs to ensure consistency in the herds, to make sure that they're getting their vitamin and mineral supplements, that they're getting, like their inoculations like, the kids do for measles or mumps, or there are certain programs, protocols that the animal goes through. They are used only when necessary to treat, in some cases prevent illness. For instance, if one of you gets sick and you need an antibiotic, I am not going to give an antibiotic to the other 98 people in the room. I'm just going to give it to you. Because it would be senseless for me to treat 98 other people when I don't have to. Too expensive. Antibiotic use is day-to-day concern for all cattle farmers and ranchers. By law, no meat is sold in the United States is allowed to contain any antibiotic residues. So if an animal gets sick at the feedlot and it's ready to go to harvest, and it's put on an antibiotic, and it's on that antibiotic for 10 days, and the withdrawal is another 10 days, that animal will be tested on day 15 to ensure that there's no residues before it goes in. And it'll be tested at the plant as well, USDA inspectors. Cattle farmers and ranchers follow the producer's guidelines for judicious use of antimicrobials. It's been in place since 1987. They use a narrow spectrum of antimicrobials whenever possible, treat the fewest number of animals when possible, and try not to use antibiotics important in human medicine. All right, very important. They're going to treat a sick animal. It's inhumane not to. And they use growth promotants. We often get a lot of questions about antibiotics, and then we get the questions about growth promotants. And why do they use it? And oftentimes the ranchers use them in the feedlot. They castrate the animals when they're younger as a way of controlling the hormones. You don't want a bunch of bulls running around and creating havoc as they get into their teenage phase of sorts. It's dangerous for the other animals. It's dangerous for the cowboys and the ranch owners, etc., to have them. So what they do is they castrate them, and then they implement that hormone through controlled measures later. Put a little pellet in their ear that dissolves. Ears are cut off and not used for any consumption whatsoever. However, they also found that there was an 18% efficiency in lean and fat ratio. 18% decrease in fat and 18% increase in lean. And looking at this next picture here, on the top is a 1940 steer, very heavy, stocky, short animal, compared to the 1990 steer, a little bit leaner, taller, a lot more muscle. Growth promotants are regularly tested for residues. They are approved by the FDA, and for pretty much there are no residues at all. A lot of people are concerned that our children are getting bigger, stronger, developing faster. I think a lot has to do with how well we're taking care of our children and how well we're feeding them, as well as you put in that whole obesity claim as well. But that's a whole other subject. Now, what would happen if we didn't use growth promotants? Well, we would need 10 million more cattle would be required to be raised. We would need to harvest 3 million more per year to feed the same amount of people that we're feeding. And we'd need 17 more acres of land, which would be equivalent to Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island. We'd have to find that land someplace to ensure we would have enough room for all those animals and be able to raise them, to be able to feed who we currently feed. Today, we feed about 144 people, as compared to in the 60s, we fed 46 people. So there's a significant difference. We're a lot more efficient. A great website and blog to go to is factsaboutbeef.com. Highly suggest you check it out. There's areas of safety, nutrition, environment, and animal care. It'll touch on basically what I've talked about today, as well goes in a little bit more in depth. But factsaboutbeef.com is where to go. If you're in food service, definitely go to beeffoodservice.com. It has some great information on there. Some of it Kari will be covering today as well with her subprimal cut. I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm unmuting the phone. There's going to be a little bit of delay from asking the question, so please, if you ask a question and we delay, it's just all natural. So anybody have any questions about what I went over today? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, what?
What exactly is in the grain that's fed to the grain finished cows?
The question is, what is exactly in the grain of the finished wheat, barley, oats, corn, sometimes sorghum, minerals, vitamins.
What is it mostly?
What is it mostly? It could be a mixture of all of those. Probably mostly corn, the majority of it. It all depends on the farm itself and what they want to achieve. And each protein has a different energy level. So some might supplement with oats. It's like it's like your secret gravy recipe. What do you put in your recipe over somebody else, or your demi-glaze or whatever? You might add a little bit more salt. They may add a little bit of something else. So that's basically what it is the farmer's saying, you know what, this nutrient mix works great, and mine might have more corn, and yours might have more oats. It all depends. It depends on the breed, too. Any other questions? Yes? This PowerPoint is actually going to be posted on YouTube. I will also hopefully soon put it on our website, so that nybeef.org website. But this will be available on YouTube as soon as they tweak it a little bit and download it within the next week or two without a problem. Questions? Yes?
Going back to like the grain mixture, will feeders, will they change it depending on the cow? Like, I mean, if a cow needs more of something, will they put it, will each cow have a different mixture, I guess?
It all depends on the lot. He asked if will the feed mixture change depending on the cow. Depends on the breed. Depends on maybe how the cows are responding. Could be the weather. Could be a lot of different things. Could be the price. Corn is high, so maybe they'll cut back on corn, add oats and soybean. Here in the state of New York, there is distilleries or the ethanol plants. So the corn goes in. There's a byproduct from that, and that silage they'll feed to the animals. They also give animals cucumbers, love cucumbers, pumpkins, watermelons. They'll feed them, toss them out in the pasture, and feed them on that too. So, but when it gets to that feedlot, they're a little bit more scientific in how they feed it out. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'd like to bring up Kari Underly. As I mentioned earlier, Kari is a James Beard nominated author for The Art of Cutting Beef. Those students here at the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute, the book is available at Barnes & Noble. You can also get the book on Amazon.com. And I'm lucky I got to see the
comp version, the original?
Yes, the beginnings of it over the years of knowing Kari.
Jamie's like, are you ever going to finish that book? Well, hello everyone, and thank you for spending your afternoon with us. So we're going to spend, thank you, we're going to spend about a half hour talking about a ribeye, okay? And this is, we can go ahead, we're done with that. This is a 112 ribeye. Are you guys familiar with what those mean, those numbers? Basically, it's a code, a description, and a picture so that everybody can be on the same page when they're ordering meat. So for example, this is a 112 ribeye. If you ordered this ribeye and you got a ribeye in and it had bones on it, you'd be like, wait a minute, that's not what I ordered. And if I'm a purveyor, I'm like, well, that's what you ordered. You wanted a beef rib. I'm Like, no, I wanted a 112 beef rib, so that means that's boneless. So there's a reason for these names. There's books that can help you with that. The Meat Buyer's Guide is one of them. And it's all information that's been put together by the USDA. So that's part of a institutional meat specification deal. Okay, we have a ribeye, and you guys need to learn about this because I think there's something very special that's going to happen around the ribeye. So I'm going to give you my little tips and tricks on how to break down a ribeye. Jean talked about having to raise more cattle and use all this land, and where is it going to come from? So as cattle get larger, guess what? So does the ribs, so does the ribeye, so do the primals, so do the subprimals, so do the individual cuts. So if these individual cuts are getting larger, what happens when we want to have a tolerance, if you will, on your portioning? So if you want an 8-ounce steak, you've got to cut it a certain thickness, and you get pretty good at knowing what that thickness is. And all of a sudden, these ribeyes are getting bigger and bigger, and now if you want to cut that ribeye, that 8-ounce portion, it's even thinner. So how can we get thicker portions of meat and smaller portions on the menu at that center of the plate cost, and also give you some options to be creative with your ideation and coming up with new things. So traditionally, a ribeye has a couple of ends. So where are we at, up front? Yeah. So here is our loin end, and you can identify the loin end because it's primarily one muscle. Okay, this is all one muscle. This is called the longissimus dorsi in geek speak, and that's what I'm probably pretty good at, or LD. Okay, this is the same muscle that's in the New York strip. It's the same muscle, the main muscle that's in the ribeye, and a little piece of this muscle goes into the chuck. We break the cow, well, we process the cow. We broke it, that's true. And then we separate it into primals. And we separate the chuck and the rib between the 5th and 6th rib. So right here would be the 5th and 6th rib, but now you're seeing that there's multiple muscles in here. So what's happening is the muscles are changing, but you still have some really great yum on this side. But the problem that we have on the chuck side, what does somebody love about the ribeye? We can just kind of shout out this answer a little bit. We love it because it's tender, right? What else do we love about it? It's flavorful, okay? What do we hate about it? It's expensive. What else? It's fatty. You know, it breaks my heart when I put all this work and love into this beautiful prime rib roast and the plate comes back and half of the fat's still sitting on the plate, and because people are freaked out by fat, they cut off half of the meat when they're trying to trim off the fat, and that half part of that meat that they're trimming off the fat is the 3rd most tender muscle in the whole beef animal. So what I'm saying is people are, Kari, where's the next value cuts? You know, we think lesser cost, less money. To me, I want to put more value into this with more options. So I look at the ribeye as being something of value. And I know that's a little crazy, but it's true. The 3rd most tender muscle is in this ribeye. So what I'm going to do first is just to show you some options. You could obviously still cut this for ribeyes. The first thing I'm going to do is just take a knife and face off the front just slightly. And this would be, if you guys weren't around, my little butcher's treat, because I would just pound that down and that would be a little snack, but we're not here to talk about that. So we're going to keep our fat and our trim separate as we go along. All right? So I'm just going to go ahead and cut a couple of steaks off the loin side, which was the one that had mainly the single muscle. And these would be your steaks that you would portion. Now, what's nice about cutting this ribeye is you can see there's not, I mean, obviously I have to trim it, but they do a lot of the work for you. So we're going to trim the fat to our spec, whatever that would be. And then you could leave that long tail on there if you'd like. But this is the traditional way of cutting the ribeye. I didn't do that. So we get this part. If I left it whole, it'd be a ribeye roast. If I had the bones left on there, it would be a bone-in ribeye roast or a prime rib or a standing rib. All those names are synonymous. How do you say that word? There we go. Thank you. All right. So we're going to trim that. Okay. You can trim the bottom. Now sometimes you'll see on a rib, sometimes you'll see on the back of a rib these little intercostal muscles, okay? And those are the piece of meat. This is the piece of meat that lies between the rib bones. So these rib bones are gone. So what the processor does is, when's the last time somebody had a beef back rib? So this would be the equivalent of a pork baby back rib. It's okay. Probably never, right? Because they're long bones and a lot of work, a lot of time for not a lot of meat. So what happens is there's not a lot of value. So they put those pieces of meat on the ribeye because we can charge more for it, okay? So now what I'm going to do is start to work into this new alternative merchandising. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these little pieces of rib fingers or intercostal. Believe it or not, we talked about export items, and these little pieces of meat where it looks like absolutely nothing, probably to you and I, is a big export item. And we do some crazy things when we name meat. Fingers, like who wants to eat rib fingers? But we call them rib fingers. That's pretty much more of an export item, so this is something that is pretty chewy. You definitely have to break that down. So now what we have on the top is this fat. So I'm going to use my hands. Whenever you're not sure when you're cutting meat, don't use a knife. Use your hands first, okay? So I'm just going to follow this fat, and I can pull this off with my hands. See that? Very similar to like what you would do if you were working with a beef tenderloin, where you can pull the fat right off. Okay? See? And now, I already removed those intercostal muscles on the back. So now what I'm trying to do is remove this lip. Again, with these names that we like to use, a lip. It's not really a lip, it's just this piece that's on the rib that they call it a lip. So I could continue to pull, or I'm just going to release this. Okay? So this is the piece of fat that we would usually trim off. If you're looking for tallow or beef tallow, this is definitely something you would want to hang on to. Okay. I'm going to whittle this down, and what I'm after is in the middle here is this little piece of meat that I call kind of the chef's secret. Never cut towards yourself like that, okay? This is years of practice. I've been doing this since I was 12 years old, so I'm pretty comfortable with the knife, but always cut away from yourself. And I hate to focus on cutting yourself, but especially when you start working with larger pieces of meat that have a lot of bones in it, always think about, not constantly, but when you set yourself up, if something bad were to happen, where's my knife going to go? So if I'm doing something on the side and I'm going to slip into no man's land. I don't want to slip into myself. Or if I'm boning something and I come this way, make sure you're boning this way. So that way if you do slip, hopefully you're just slipping. You're not cutting someone, but you're not cutting your mate either. So this is just this little part of the lip that's in the inside. It's this piece of meat right here, if you will. And I love it with just a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and finish it in the skillet. So give me a second here, because I have to fix my hair. Sorry, it's driving me crazy. All right, gloves. There we go. Thank you, guys. All right. So how are we doing so far? You follow me? This is pretty basic. We're just getting down to the nitty-gritty. So how many people love a beef tenderloin? When you go out to a restaurant, how many people order beef tenderloin? Okay. How many people order it because it tastes great? Oh, interesting. How many people order it because it's tender? Okay. How many people order it because it's the smallest cut on a steak menu? That's me. You know, when I'm looking at a menu, I'm looking for options that, you know, are just a smaller portion. So what we can do with the ribeye now is instead of offering, you know, large portion sizes, we're going to make this a little smaller. You're still going to get your ribeye experience. I'm just trimming off a little bit of this lean off the fat here. All of these trims would go into something that you would obviously cook down. If you were a sauce butcher in the back of your shop, you'd probably make a bolognese or something with the lean. Okay, so here's some more lean. Here's our fat. Is that one of my little deals? Okay. Now I'm down to basically a cleaned out ribeye roll, and you could actually purchase it like this with all of that removed. But do you think this is going to cost more? Absolutely. So you've got to do your math to justify, is what you see in this tray to my left worth the cost of buying it this way? That's a decision you'll have to make in your operation someday. I would think there's use for that. You know, there's stock, there's bolognese, there's fat. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim off delicately this little bit of fat off the top. And the reason why I say delicately is because underneath here, I've mentioned it before, is the third most tender muscle in the beef animal. So how many people have had prime rib at the holiday? Right? And you guys are obviously know what you're doing in the kitchen. So do you go in there when the prime rib comes out of the oven and there's that nice, beautiful, roasted yum yum of a cap, and you're in there picking it off because it just tastes so good because you know what you're after? That's the ribeye cap, okay? That's what tastes so wonderful. So we're going to trim this off. So I just want to make sure that we don't trim off too much of the lean, is why we're just trying to be delicate with removing the fat from the lean. Now, I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to go to the end from my chuck. So the chuck end has multi-muscles, right? Because the loin end just has one, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hands again. I'm going to find that fat seam. I'm just going to pull this open. Okay, there's a fat seam that runs right down the middle. Can you see that? Now, I can take my knife when it won't release anymore and just cut into the fat, because again, this is prized meat, so we want to be very careful. So always cut into the fat, if you will. Okay, you can just keep rolling this back. There's something about that sound, isn't it? You know, you've cut meat way too long when that's like hot, right? All right. Okay, so now you're going to see here as I've pulled this apart, you're starting to see all this fat in the inside. And that's that fat that comes back on the plate, right? So you're also going to notice that this muscle's a bit odd-shaped. To me, that's the obvious visual cue, because where it starts to get slender, remember when I said we could still start by taking our portion control steaks at the beginning, if you wanted to? You could continue all the way up to about that point, is one option, okay? That's one way to do it. So you can get half of this method, and could you mind pulling my glove off? Thank you. My hair's bugging me, sorry. And I know that's a no-no, and now I have to glove up. Do you mind? Who knew, right? Thank you. All right. So to me, that's the perfect way to look at that. This ribeye is actually a smaller ribeye. It's not one of the larger ones like we had for the folks that were here last night. That one was a bit larger, so you can still use it in this fashion. So we're going to go back to the ribeye. And so if I put this back, if you will, the thin portion of the ribeye cap is on the loin end. The thicker portion of the ribeye cap is on the chuck end. So I'm getting more ribeye cap if I remove from the chuck end because it's thicker than this thin part. from the check-in, there's also this little muscle that you could either leave on or remove it. I'm going to remove it because I just think eventually this is going to become an item. I think this is going to be the answer to the petite tender from the shoulder. This could be like a ribeye petite tender. Don't go running to your purveyors and calling up the New York Beef Council wanting to know where all the information is, because I'm going rogue, okay? This is just an option that I think is going to happen. When you start pulling this is just going to be hanging there. You guys are going to be creative. And to me, this is like an option for a turkey tenderloin. So, excuse me, a chicken tenderloin. So if you could buy like a little bag of these, I think that would be a pretty good little deal, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove what we don't like in the ribeye, and we're going to take off this fat. Now, you can take this ribeye cap. We're going to remove the fat. We're going to denude it. You could butterfly this whole piece. You could then put some, I'm not a chef, okay? But I'm a pretty good cook. But, I would think some feta, some sun-dried tomato, roll it, stuff it, put it in there, get happy, do what you do, tie it. I know once you put stuffing inside of meat, you got to cook it to a certain temperature, isn't that right? So 160, 165. So we don't like our meat cooked that high of a temp. I don't, personally. But by adding that in, but the good thing is this ribeye cap is so juicy and flavorful that even if you do have to take it to that temperature, you're still going to retain a lot of that yum yum, okay? So now we're going to take our knife. We're going to slide right underneath that connective tissue. Okay, see how we're doing that? Let the knife do the work. Put it under the meat, angle it slightly up so the knife grabs it. Sometimes duller knives work better at this because the sharp knife goes right through it. Okay. I would leave on this back side, this heavier portion right here is fine for me. If it's too fatty and you just don't like it, and if this happens to be for some competition and you're afraid you might not like that, then you might want to trim it off. That's your preference. So again, you could take this whole piece. I think this makes the best fajitas I've ever had in my life. You could steak this whole. You could serve it for carving. So the thinner part is from the loin end, so we're just going to separate this. I could continue to portion it again. The beautiful thing, can you see the fat line in there and the marbling? That's why this is so amazing. But when you leave it on the ribeye, you're just getting this little piece, and it gets cooked to shreds, right? Okay, so now we're going to tray up. And we have a tag somewhere here for our ribeye cap steaks. Should grab that. We'll move this out of our way. Just set that. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do on this chuck end, again, you can cut them however your portion would like, however you like to portion them. On this chuck end where it's thicker, I'm going to lay it down and just cut right through the middle. I'm going to put some pressure on top, and I'm just going to fillet this out. I could keep it connected if I want to do a little mini roll, but I'm just going to push this out. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, remember, from the loin end it was thinner. Now I have two portions that are the same thickness that'll cook well, and I just got two portions out of one piece. So we played this game yesterday, so if you played this game with me last night, you can't play right now. But this piece of meat right here is sold at a steak processor, somebody that just cuts steaks for a living and sells them to restaurants and consumers from mail order. So 4 8-ounce portions, let's say like this, all cleaned up and ready to go. All you have to do is take them out of your, how much do you think they go for? This is mail order. Just somebody throw out a number. $20. What else we got? $9. We got $9. Oh, let's go the other way. Which way? 30. Come on, somebody's got to play with me here. Let's go. 30. Do I hear 35? 40. 45. 50? 55. 60, 65.
100.
$175 a pound. Now, I'm not suggesting you guys are going to walk out of here tomorrow and put this on a menu when you get your restaurant, but think about it. People are already selling this cut at $75 a pound. There's value to be made here, okay? This is an amazing piece of meat. So just think about it. So now I'm going to remove all the fat from the remaining piece of the LD muscle, or the longissimus dorsi, or the main ribeye portion. Excuse me there. Oops. So we're going to take this fat off. And if I fling you, I apologize. It was just a little one. It's kind of like being at a rock concert, right? You know, and all right. See, now I'm trying to be really delicate here because I don't want you to. Okay. Trim off the fat. Trim off the fat in that middle part. Has anybody ever gone to the grocery store and seen ribeye steaks and there's like a hole missing where they pop out and they take out the piece of meat on a ribeye? That's why we're doing this, because I hate that. It's a hole in my meat. I'm not buying Swiss cheese, I'm buying meat, right? So I put that in there. Okay, you could leave this whole for a roast. I think this is amazing, is sliders, roast. One thing that I think is really interesting is when you think about that tenderloin that everybody loves on the menu, there's only probably about, 8 usable pounds maybe in that whole piece of meat, the whole cow, if you will. So there's going to be a lot of demand on those kind of cuts. So what can we offer that's going to compete with those higher prices? Ribeye fillets. I'm going to denude this. You do not have to do this. I'm like doing it. We eat this already if we left this as a ribeye steak. Okay. So just pick a point, angle your knife. We're going to take some of this off. Okay. Now, I know I've already mentioned that I like this as a little bit of a snack, but what if now you created a carpaccio flight? If you did this same kind of cutting technique with the New York strip, you can use the same cutting technique with the top sirloin and a fillet. So now, if you wanted, you could have a ribeye. Now, this isn't frozen. That's not a joke. And I'll try to cut this as thin as I can, but I don't have my glasses on and it's not frozen. But you kind of get the picture that this could be very quickly a quick, if you want to do carpaccio, if you're serving breakfast and you wanted a quick little on a bagel, that's my very scientific cooking. You could do that. I think it's phenomenal, just like this, little sandwich steaks. But what we could do is, because this lends itself perfectly to the shape, would be to go about maybe 1.25 inches, 1.25 inches. And now we're creating ribeye fillets. You could cut these smaller if you'd like, but now we're getting the marbling. We don't have all that fat wrapped around here, and we're going to have a little more flavor as we will a tenderloin. So now we can have a ribeye fillet. Okay. Now, if this was larger, I'm still going to do this, but a larger one would be helpful. So if you do buy ribeyes by the case, look through that box of ribeyes and pick out the big ones to do this kind of stuff with. So we're going to pretend this one's big. I'm going to cut it in half. Just trim a little of that fat off. And we are going to do a couple things with this. First of all, we're going to just tie one of these off. So make a loop, pull it through, snap, snug it up, tie it off. Okay? I really like to not do this with plastic gloves. So where I'm heading with this is I'm going to make smaller little fillets, if you will. You could leave this, again, whole, roasted off. Make a loop, grab it with your fingers, pull it through. That's not good because it's not snapping, and I don't want to keep doing that because I'm going to rip the meat. So I'm just going to double tie it off. Okay? And where I'm heading here is I think these are going to make some amazing little ribeye medallions. How often do we have ribeye on the appetizer menu? I'm going to venture to say not too often. Okay, snug it up. I'm going to take one more off the side here. Snap it, and then we're going to tie it off. You guys got that? You get really good at that when you're chained to a thing of string during the holidays and you can't leave until you have all these ribs tied off. Okay, so now I'm going to just cut this. Normally I wouldn't recommend doing that, but we're going to put there. I'm going to cut between these two because now they're small, they're bite size. You guys are very creative, so I'm sure you could put some kind of a blue cheese. Now here's the extent of my culinary expertise, but blue cheese and butter, you know, those fancy butters that you put on top, or some kind of a sauce that you create. But look at these nice little portions for a small tasting flight, an appetizer menu, or maybe you just want smaller bites on the plate, period. You know, maybe these two would be enough. Maybe one would be enough. That's the beauty of this program, okay? So here's our little ribeye fillets. And now we have one more piece that we're going to play with. Okay, you guys seen this before? What's that? Not exactly? Okay. All right. So sometimes what happens, as I'll just speak from my personal experience, I'm getting a little older, and you know, your muscles aren't as in shape as they used to be, and we have a lot of muscles on our body. And so one way to tighten up how we look is we might hit a certain aisle in the ladies' department store, and there are these things called Spanx. And Spanx kind of pack it in and make everything kind of look a little tighter and a little neater, right? So that's what we're doing with this piece of, we're going to do with this piece of meat. This is some netting. The ribeye probably doesn't need it quite as much as some of the other muscles, but I just wanted to show you this little deal here. You could pull this off. It tightens it up. I don't have to mess with the tying. The drag on this would be that if you were to put any rub, as you pull it off, some of that rub might come off. But what a neat little roast for, you can put that on the tray, the ribeye steak. I don't think I put it on there. But a little, if this was aged, dry aged, whatever you wanted to do, just a little sliders. You can roast it off for slider sandwiches. I mean, when's the last time you've taken or tried to cook off maybe a 1.5 pound roast? Probably never. You always think of these roasts as being really large. Buffets, carving stations, you're not holding large pieces of meat. You have these smaller, quicker pieces. If you're working in non-commercial, and I was talking to somebody that was going to put this on the menu at a living center for people who age, you know, the communal living and service, and they wanted to put something on here that was lean, tender, smaller portions. So there's just a lot of different options now with the ribeye instead of having this large piece. These could be two-stepped, sear it in a pan, get that nice caramelization, finish it in the oven, indirect grill, saute. I mean, there's just so many ways to cook and prepare these and get creative. We could also use these as some ingredient items, but So here's all of our options for you folks, just out of one ribeye. And let's face it, one ribeye, cutting ribeye steaks all day, that's boring. We do that all the time. Let's have some fun and get creative. Let's put our steaks back up here on the table. Give you guys a chance to see what we've got here. So our different versions of our fillets. And then we've got our original ribeyes, our petite roast, our little ribeye petite tender, and the different things you can do with the ribeye cap. You could butterfly this out. You could do a double butterfly. You could put your creative energy in there and tie it back. Golly, I'm sure there's some tartare in here and some ceviche. Oh, that's the wrong one. Carpaccio. So carpaccio is cutting meat really, really thin with a little olive oil, salt, and pepper, for those that might not know. So that's what I have for the ribeye today. So hopefully that's going to help you guys think about what's going to go on, and maybe you can use this later on in your careers. And I just want to thank you guys for lending your talents to our industry and the food business. It's one way to keep food local, agriculture local. It's the #1 job that we know in exports. So thank you guys for being the stewards of our food. So thank you for having me.
I'm opening it up for any questions for Kari, either via the phone or here in the room. Any questions? Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much again for your time and for being here, and again to the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute for videotaping this and providing it on YouTube. It'll probably be downloaded in the next couple of weeks. And thank you very much. Any further questions you may have, feel free to contact me at nybeef.org. It's our website, and my email address is jotoole@nybeef.org. And then there's Facebook. Kari Underly has Facebook and Twitter. And we have a Facebook page, New York Beef Council. So by all means, connect with us and stay tuned. In April 10th and 11th, we will be conducting a culinary tour with 7 different schools across the state. And we have 3 of the students here, or actually 6 of the students here today, representing the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute as well as Niagara County Community College on their culinary program. So good luck to them. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a good one.